Hey everybody, so welcome back to Jim Bob's Garden. So today we're going to have some plant porn. That's right, today we're going to help my squash plants behind me to have some sex. Plant sex. Alright, cue up the porno music. Alright, so one of the issues that I have here in Jacksonville is for some reason the pollinators don't really come around right now. It's the end of April. I want to say it's like the 27th or so. But at any rate, the point is that right now, for some reason, I don't have a lot of bees. I have a few bumblebees, but none of the honeybees, none of the native bees, just not a lot of activity right now in all of my flowers. So what does that mean? That means that right now, things like squash and cucumbers aren't really getting pollinated. So by the time the insects really do start to come back around, not only will the pollinators return, which last year I think we had the same kind of issue, where essentially I was really concerned about how many pollinators we had at this time of year, and then later on in the season I started to see more and more, and then we had so much activity on our flowers later in the season. But yet, for some reason, at this time of year, we don't. I'm not sure why. I mean, there's really nothing around. Nobody really sprays in this area that I'm aware of. So I don't think it's a problem with pesticides and such. I'm really not sure. But at any rate, so I need to get these squash and cucumbers pollinated, because if I don't, then what'll end up happening by the time the bees and everybody, all the pollinators come back, what will have happened is so will the squash beetles and the cucumber beetles and the cucumber worms that get in and start really munching at my crop. So in order to make that happen, we're going to have some plant sex. Alright, so let me show you how you can go about hand pollinating your cucumbers and your squash. Alright, so first things first, the plants have got to be in the mood. Alright, so what do I mean by in the mood? So you can see that my flowers are open right now on the squash. And I've got some small plants up here. Again, the flowers are open. Now when it starts to warm up, basically all of those flowers will close up and not be receptive to hand pollination. In fact, if you go over here and you look, you can see that some of the cucumber flowers are still a little more closed up, and I noticed that they want to open up, it seems to me, later on in the day. So we'll give them a chance to open up before we try and do this with them. So now the second thing that we need to be aware of is what is a female flower and what is a male flower. Now it's very easy to tell on squash and cucumbers. If you look down here and you see that flower has no squash up underneath it. There's just a stem, goes straight up to a flower, and that is a male flower. But then if you look down here at this flower here, you can see that there's a small baby squash right here, and that is a female flower. Alright, same thing down there. If you look at this flower right here, it has just a stem going up to the flower, so that is a male flower. And then over here you can see and over here you can see that this one has a squash underneath it, so this is a female flower. Now the same thing happens on cucumbers. You can see here that this flower has a small cucumber behind it, and then underneath here, get a better view of that. Well, like this one right there, you can see that has basically just a stem going to the flower, no cucumber behind it. And so that is a male flower. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take my handy dandy scissors, and you can use any kind of cutting tool and we're going to cut that flower off. Now you'll notice inside the middle here is the parts where the pollen come from. If you look carefully, you can see that some of the pollen right here is actually falling off. Alright, and that pollen is basically what's got to get into the female flower. It would normally be picked up by bees and butterflies and such. So we're going to take and fold this flower back, and then we're going to take it, and you'll see the different type of structure in here for the male and the female flower. Alright, this is the male, this is the female. So we're just going to take this and rub it around inside that center structure for the female. Alright. And hopefully that will do the trick to pollinate the female flowers. Now I'm going to cut this one off. I'm going to show you something. So if you look at this, this is an unpollinated squash. You can see it's already starting to turn yellow as small as it is. And this is never going to develop beyond that. That's why I've already cut it off. It's not going to do me any good. And in fact, I'm going to cut them all off that haven't been pollinated. But because it hasn't been pollinated, it's not going to develop into a full-size squash. I'm not sure if these, I'm sure they're probably edible, but they're just never going to get real big, and they're going to turn yellow well before they've developed it to full size. So that's really just not going to do me any good. But essentially, that's all there really is to hand pollination. Now, some people do this with a paintbrush or with a Q-tip or whatever else. But particularly on squash, it seems like this would be the easier way to go about doing it. In fact, let me try and take this flower here that's closed up somewhat. I might be a little late on this one, but we're going to try and pollinate it. Rubbing this all around in there. And we'll see if maybe that one still takes. But the better way, of course, is to do it while the flowers are open. Alright, let's go work on our cucumbers. So with the cucumbers, once again, I'm going to snip this one off. And I'm going to fold that back. Well, that flower wasn't very well developed. I don't know if I can do this. And we're going to stick that all up in that female flower. Let me see. Do I have a better one? That one's a little better. Now, normally, like I said, if you had good pollinators, this would not be necessary. Should not be necessary. But because right now, I just don't seem to have many pollinators, I'm going to have to try and hand pollinate as many of these as I can so that I can hopefully develop some fruit before the bug infestation really starts. Now, for full transparency, I gotta admit, I am a hand pollinator virgin, so to speak. This is my first time. I've never really done this before. I haven't really felt that it was necessary. But I will tell you, last year I had a lot of issues growing cucumbers. Didn't get a lot, and I want to say that the pollinator issue is the problem. So, I want to show you this real quick. If you look around, you'll see that I have a lot of flowers and a lot of pollinator attractors, at least in theory. You can see I've got a lot of flowers in the background. I have, my collards are flowering, which I'm allowing them to do so that hopefully it'll draw in pollinators. I've got wildflowers. You see the yellow flowers in the background. You see the orange flowers over there by the fig tree. There's some white flowers down there, a lot of different flowers that are available for the pollinators. And in fact, I let my weeds grow, and if you look over here, you can see up on my septic mound, if you look carefully, that there are weeds growing that all flower. You got, of course, the cucumber flowers, the squash flowers. I mean, there's a lot of different things to attract pollinators. And even over here on my neighbor's yard, you can see he's got jasmine blooming. So once again, should be attracting lots of pollinators. For whatever reason, the pollinators just really aren't here right now. And that's concerning for me, obviously. And I'm going to look into what I can do to try and hopefully improve, even from what I have done so far with all the flowers, that I have got growing around, to try and bring these pollinators in earlier. That's something I got to work on, because without pollinators, you don't have food. That's just the way it works. Many crops require the pollination to be carried out by insects of one sort or another, flying from one flower to the next and moving pollen around from the male to the female flowers. Without that, things like cucumbers and squash just will not happen. All right, so that's something I got to work on. I'm going to look into something called a bug hotel, and we're going to see how that works. I got to look into it a bit more before I start building it to make sure I get it done right. But that's something I'm going to do here in the very near future. I'm going to build one. Got to figure out where to place it and such. But bottom line is, I'm going to keep doing all I can to bring the pollinators back. And if worse comes to worse, if I don't have any other options, I may go ahead and actually, get a beehive and start basically making honey by, taking care of bees. That can be a pretty expensive project, but it would be nice to have our own honey. I don't know if I have enough here to actually keep the bees going, but that's an option. That's one other thing I'm going to be looking into here shortly. Alright, that's what I got going on today, a little bit of plant sex. Alright, if you're bored and got nothing else to do, go out and help your plants have sex. I mean, nothing quite like it. But here in Jacksonville, like I said, if you wait for the pollinators, you may find that they show up about the same time as the bugs that really start to eat your produce. And so if you really want to get a good crop, it may be the only option is to go ahead and do some hand pollination. Alright, thanks for stopping by. Do me a favor, give me a like and a subscribe. Let me know what you think. And most importantly, grow something. Get something growing in your yard. And hey, if you're sitting around bored one morning, maybe it's time to go out and have a little plant sex. Alright, come back and see me.